and gentlemen. Thank you for joining our webinar today on 2025's Top Banking Trends. Special thanks to Temenos for sponsoring this webinar and the speakers for taking the time to join us today. Now, it is the time of the year again for us to peer into the crystal ball and see what kind of trends will shape banking for the rest of the year. I think these days it's becoming more and more difficult to be able to do so, to be able to kind of separate the noise from the actionable trends. But lucky for us today, we've got a panel of industry experts to break it all down for us. Joining us today, right on top, we have Jessica Lam, who is the Group Chief Strategy Officer at VLab. Below Jessica, we have Frankie Y, the Business Solution Director at Temenos. Below Frankie, we have Taruni Ramamurthy, who is the head of FSI for Malaysia and Philippines. And below Taruni, we have Albertino, who is the co-CEO of GoTime Bank Philippines. Now, before we start, maybe quick congratulations are in order for both Albert and Jessica. Jessica, I recently read that you guys have just broke even after 4 years of operation. Congratulations on that. And Albert, of course, your Time Group has also recently achieved unicorn status thanks to a investment from New Bank, which is again, a massive accomplishment for the group. And what a great way to start the year, and what a great way to start the session. Any quick words from the both of you before we start with the questions I've prepared for the day?
Just wanted to say happy to be here, Vincent, and
Always.
privileged to be in this company.
Always happy to have all of you guys. Now, before we begin, just wanted to also remind the audience as well, feel free to post your comments, post your questions on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we'll try our best to address some of the questions that you may have for the panelists along the way. Now, let's kickstart by looking at some of the biggest trends that are emerging in 2025. Maybe, Jessica, from your vantage point as the Group Chief Strategy Officer of VLab, which has operations in multiple countries and different kind of business models, maybe you can break it down for us what you see are the biggest trends that will impact the sector in 2025. Jessica?
Yeah. So happy New Year, everyone. First of all, we had a great close to 2024 with We Love Bank become profitable after 4 years. So it's something that we're extremely proud and excited about. I think specifically when you think about the digital financial landscape in 2025, there's going to be a couple of big trends. One is really coming out of the markets being more stabilized right now. And I think this is a time where, a lot of companies will be going into their grow or expansion phase. I would have said in the last few years, it was a lot more of being very disciplined financially to be able to sustain the business in a difficult market condition. And this should be the time where we should see a lot of businesses really accelerate what they want to do when it comes to investments, when it comes to growth and expansion. Particularly for Hong Kong, at least in the digital banking segment, you'll see a lot of stories, hopefully in the next year or so, where banks are coming to a state of, hey, we've proven that the proof of concept works. And the next thing now will be, now that we've achieved the steady state of profitability, how do we grow from there? At least that's how we're seeing it. And we hope that many of our peers will follow in a similar trajectory. It's no longer a discovery, can we get this done, in terms of what we want to do. The second thing I would see is a lot more of expansion opportunities where you're going to lean and leverage on partners in other markets in terms of how do you really start to implement a lot of the best practices. In the first few years, I think it's always about trying to steady your own ship first. And then now it's about how do we swap best practice notes with, our friends time or other organizations such as that, so that, or partners with Temenos or AWS. So it's about, okay, now that we've established a space, how do we try to really build that trajectory up? And I think it can be across industries and not just digital banking. Even a lot of the traditional organizations are looking to level up, and this is the time where the markets have more or less stabilized. Elections are behind us now in many of the ASEAN regions. For the sort of the uptake to really take place.
And I think, if you recall, last we spoke was in Thailand in Money 2020, and you mentioned that within a year you guys would break even, and right on the dot that you guys did break even. So you're a woman of your words, and I admire that. And I think some of the points you brought up is very valid, right? We've moved from a kind of growth at all costs kind of phase, and then we're moving to more financial discipline, and then we're moving to a more market expansion phase for a lot of the digital banks. We're seeing existing and pushing into new markets, whether through acquisitions or setting up new entities. So a lot of very pertinent points that you brought up over there. Thanks for that, Jessica. Moving on to Frankie. Frankie, what are your views on the big trends that will shape banking this year? Frankie, I'm afraid you might be muted. We can't really hear you.
Can
There we
now?
go. Yes, go for it. Okay.
Maybe some delay from Dubai. And I was taking a big perspective from the technology and the software capabilities. I think really I agree also, I mean, what Jessica mentioned about now the bank is really looking into how to realizing and materializing from all the technologies we have been talking about. No matter on the cloud computing, we are now talking more cloud adoption in different locations, right? And also on the digitalization, banks are getting more ready to really adopt and even accelerate on that application, right? We have been talking about all the experiences, and now we are talking even more about how we infuse the human-centric engagement instead of just, I mean, talking about the digital uplift and more intuitive and more convenient personalization definitely is really, I mean, what we will be fortifying. And on the data side, right, the data really, those banks we are talking with and working day to day, they are getting more ready in digital to the core, which is a good foundation to leverage and really, I mean, translate into some actionable insights. So, second, on the AI thing, I mean, there is a big, I mean, right topic. Always, I said, I mean, for AI, we need to look into the use case, and the use case are also, I think, I observed quite a number of, I mean, the areas. I mean, the banks already adopt in different dimensions. So we maybe can open that discussion later on. Unfold it at the moment. And the third one is really the payment. The payment is all talking about the standardization and also the interoperability. So cross-border, domestic, I think that kind of collaboration within the region, like what I mean has been happening in Europe. I think that trend I observing in the space of Asia. That is something going to happen.
Really, really fascinating stuff. And I think, to your point on AI, I think there's so much we can dive into about how certain banks are utilizing it. And even on the consumer side, we're seeing, of course, a lot of new fraud cases, right? And I think if you guys have followed the news yesterday, there was a lady who was fished by a deep fake of Brad Pitt, who unfortunately lost, I believe, 150,000 pounds. I think it's getting real crazy out there, and there's so much for us to be talking about in a moment. But in the meantime, let's jump to Taruni. Taruni, what are your thoughts on like some of the big trends that we can expect for this year, other than Brad Pitt
Firstly, Vincent,
darling
and to
into
my
us?
panel and everyone who's listening, Happy New Year! It's another start. It's another chance to look at and predict what's going to come our way. So, Vincent, my point of view is 2025 is probably going to be the year where we dial the clock back a little bit and go back to banking in the good old days, when I was a kid and my dad would take me to the branch and the teller knew me and knew which, what my favorite subjects were and what job I wanted to do when I grew up. And I think that paradigm shift is going to be made possible because Gen AI has now reached conversation topic in every board of every bank. Um, you know, and I really like something that New Bank has said, and Albert, fantastic to see them come into our part of the world, which is does personal banking really need to be the privilege of the wealthy? And your bank getting to know you at the level of a single customer, what your needs are, what your aspirations are, where you are, how do I help you get there? That level of personalization to me is going to be the largest shift in how banks need to operate to be able to reach customers, reach them at scale, and reach them at a price point that still makes them break even and stay profitable.
I think that's interesting that you also brought up the good old days of branches, right? So I think there was a point where we're like, branches are dead, forget about branches, the future is all digital. And I'm sure, Jessica, you're also aware that, the recent HKMA change. And then we're also reading about a lot of Hong Kong digital banks rethinking whether or not they should roll out some form of branch strategy. And of course, Albert Go Time, a lot of the success is also tied to your kiosk and the phygital kind of approach, right? So I think that's another good theme that we can really dive deep into a little bit later. But in the meantime, let's jump to Albert and get his sense of what are the top trends that he thinks will be shaping banking this year. Albert, you have the floor. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Vincent. Happy New Year, everyone. Let me dovetail from what Taruni had said. I like the fact that she started off with hyper personalization, and I do agree. Frankie also said the magic word AI. I think AI will drive hyper personalization. AI will be used to determine customer behavior, customer trends, and then you'll see an unprecedented scale of products and services being offered by financial institutions that are bespoke or tailor fit to customers. Because we're doing hyper personalization, and because this is coming from a lot of these platforms, another trend that most likely would emerge is actually hyper connectivity among the digital ecosystems. You've got platforms across industries, not just the financial services industry, but also across countries. And we'll be able to tap into these very soon. And you see a little bit of it with regulators mandating or nudging institutions being regulated in that direction, right? That being the case, it started in Europe and in the US, soon in Asia, I guess, maybe a little bit in the Philippines, is actually the expansion of open banking.
Yeah.
You've got all kinds of data that's now being secured and thought of being shared across banks, fintechs, and third-party providers through secure APIs and channels, right? So you start off with hyper-personalization, connectivity, and then expansion of open banking. And then not to forget, of course, with the good comes the bad. You have bad actors. So there will be some definitely innovations to protect against what you mentioned earlier, scams, fraud perpetration.
So many themes that were brought up throughout the whole start of the conversation, right? From AI to open banking to branches. I feel like we could probably be here all week. But maybe let's start with AI first, and let's maybe continue with Albert and then go back to Frankie, to Rooney, and then back to Jessica. Albert, how are you guys using AI in GoTime Bank? Or how are you looking to?
So, we've let me use GoTime as a specific example where we've actually started using AI. One of the things that we've committed to with the bank is that whenever a customer of ours reaches out to the bank, whether that's in the app, online, on social media, on email, or on a call, our commitment is that the other person at the end of that conversation is a human. We believe that the more digital the bank becomes, the more human we have to be. But that does not mean where the number of humans that we hire will be directly proportional to the number of customers that onboard, right? Well, this is where AI comes in for us. AI becomes a complement or supplements the capability of our CX teams. We believe in human in the loop or tech in the loop. A customer service agent who can initially handle one call at a time will now be able to handle multiple queries at a time simultaneously on call, on app, on social media, etc. Because AI is preparing typical answers, possible alternatives that the agent is facing at the moment, and all of this at the agent's fingertips. So that's one very good way of using AI to complement and supplement capability.
Vincent, you are on mute now.
Sorry, I think my mic disconnected for a moment. So I was saying earlier, I think that's kind of the narrative these days, right? That a lot of this kind of work is very AI enabled. If you guys have followed in Malaysia, the last digital bank has just gotten the green light to launch. And very much their entire focus is also on AI focused banking. And what I thought was really cool is that they are trying to build a chat GPT like interface.
Mm,
So instead
mm,
of doing transactions, you kind of text the bank, hey, I want to pay this guy for dinner, and they'll try to work it out. But of course, it's still all demo. I don't know when it actually launches, if it will be as good as how they promote it. So we'll keep our readers posted on that. But Frankie, tell us about what you're seeing. Like, what are some of the great cases of AI that you're seeing that your clients are using, maybe some of the projects you work on, or any cool cases around the world that you've observed?
Yeah, we are observing AI really closely. Early back to, really 2016, I would say. The time we are still talking about data analytics, or more the modeling, prescriptive one, and to evolving into the predictive one. And lately, I think more on the Gen AI, how is the application? So I think automation is one key. I'm sharing some from the evolution journey. Earlier day is about how we can automate more about the work and the processes in the system, right? And now the application turns into on the KYC thing, and on the anti-fraud, and also, on the chat supporting servicing aspect, and definitely expanded into the also the investment strategy. What is the recommendation? Like a advisory role, part of the offering, and credit scoring also is a key area. I can see what AI has been quite early adopted to help on retail and also corporate side on the credit scoring. And lately, the Gen AI really even helping the bank users to really automate their day-to-day operation. Like, for example, if I want to, extract a profitability, most profitable customers in the bank, then I just can type that natural language, and the Gen AI pull out from the data, the reporting, the dashboard, even some insightful information. That is something we are looking into that space, the application side as well.
Very cool. Thanks for all that examples. Tarini, what are you seeing?
So Vincent, I would categorize it into three buckets. We're seeing grow the bank, protect the bank, and run the bank. Growing the bank would be, for example, again, going back to this generational shift in customer bases that banks will have. If you speak to your average 20-year-old, no one likes to be called anymore. Their comfort in how they interact with their bank is chat. So signing up or getting your KYC done through a KYC on a chatbot, which is run with a GenAI platform. Simple things like, what are the documentations you need? Is the checklist in order? Running the bank is obviously where a lot of use cases are coming into play. Albert spoke about, contact center. If I'm, say, somebody in a call center in the Philippines, don't call me during my shift. All of that muscle that previously would be managed by how much a human being could process today is supplemented because GenAI is able to pick up all of that. I think my favorite, though, is protect the bank, because as much as you're seeing GenAI progress on customer growth or business growth, you're also seeing GenAI with the price drop that's come in being picked up by bad actors. There is we're building prototypes with customers, for example, where, if you get a fake call, that fake call is directed to a bot who kind of learns how a fake call is being run. So protect the bank to me is where, my fascination's the most. I also like how you can real time look at sanctions, make sure compliance, which is something every bank is very bothered about, is made stronger, faster, easier, because there is a Gen AI process that's running it.
Well, with the current political landscape, the whole sanctions thing become even more important to do so,
Yeah.
right? And on the AI front, I think battling against the bad actors, besides just the bank, I recall there was a case in the UK where one of the telco companies were creating this AI granny avatar that's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
really, really slow and just really like just wasting the time of the scammers, right? I thought that was a very, very funny AI use case that is used to battle fraudsters. Now let's jump on to Jessica. Jessica, what are your views for us in terms of how you guys are using AI and how you see it could potentially impact the sector?
So I resonate with all
Mm.
the three prior speakers in terms of what they said. I think it's quite funny because we're all digital native or reasonably digital native companies and organizations. Um, and so when we think about AI, it's something that's been part of our blood from the beginning, or maybe so we're a 12-year-old company. So I would say definitely from at least 10 plus years ago, we've been using different forms of AI into what we do. Now, however, I think right now, because AI has become such a buzzword, right? For good reason, don't get me wrong. There is a blurring of the lines between what is just technology, what we would have historically called technology improvements, or now everything is known as AI in that sense. So I think a lot of the examples which, Frankie spoke about being predictive, prescriptive, then predictive, and then actually being Gen AI, historically we've just all this talked about technology, and that's sort of like the big bracket of how we've built everything, right? How we're able to do automation, how we're able to do LLM. We've also just called that technology in the past rather than AI, whereas now everything is being coined as AI. And I think so for a digital native organization like ourselves, we've been doing this for 10 years, but never shouted at the top of our lungs. Whereas I think a lot of more traditional organizations are actually implementing a lot of these techniques and technologies. And so for them, I feel that it's a lot more legitimate when they say they're calling it a digital transformation or implementation of a new strategy. And there's nothing wrong. It's just a different approach because of the setup, right? Because we were set up to be cloud native, digitally native, no branches, etc. Whereas I think their setup is more of we've been there for a while and we've had to transform. So I think there is a little bit of demystifying here when everyone talks about everything being AI. For example, productivity gains, right? Being able to analyze data. Is it just an LLM, right? Or data analytics, or is it AI? You can argue either way, and I'm not trying to get into the technicalities of this. To us, it's about how can you use technology to increase the productivity that a human can do, because a human can only read so fast. And how do we test it and train it to make sure that it comes out accurate and would be the same, if not better quality than what one human can do? But it's a productivity game. So as Albert says, instead of requiring X number of people, we are able to increase the number of, manpower equivalent resources without actually hiring more people. You're not replacing humans, you're supplementing and enhancing them. So our life is easier. So all of that, I am completely on board, and we do a lot of that. In fact, one of the things I wanted to ask Albert was, is AI answering your questions right now as Vincent is asking them, right? He's speaking all the
We have to
time.
see if he's typing anything, to see if he's referring to any notes. Or I could even be AI. There's enough data of me to just have an AI avatar. You don't know. It might be that advanced. But
Precisely.
you,
So
yeah.
I think for us is like, I think AI, I think there's a lot of, and I think the beauty of it now is that it feels a lot more accessible to everyone. In the past, everyone felt that AI is something that is so difficult. It needs to be someone who's an engineer, very technical, before they're able to know how to use it or use it properly. Whereas I think in the last 12 to 18, about 12 months or so, the concept of Gen AI, being able to generate images, being able to use something like a chat GPT so easily has made it a lot more acceptable, right? And that any sort of quote unquote layman is able to use it. And so I think the comfort levels have come in. So the big thing I think going forward is this, which is everyone knows that it's cool now to be associated with AI, right? Everyone wants to put AI in their tagline. However, this is where the regulators will start to come in and start putting a stamp on what you can call as being AI and what you can't say is AI, and how you need to define. I think you're seeing different regulators come in with some prescriptive guidelines on, what you can or cannot do, what you can and cannot coin. Always a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of that, but that is how the world evolves. As something becomes more popular, right, and more used and prevalent, regulators will always come in with some sort of framework to safeguard, as Tony said, right, to do protection. And mainly this is for consumer education in terms of that. I think that is the interesting thing that I'm really looking forward to. But what I don't want to do is stop anyone from exploring and learning about the capabilities of what Gen AI or different of these conversation tools can do. Because that is how we can, be creative, right? Don't stop in terms of what is possible. Experiment. There's so many different service providers out there that can, read a document and create a podcast with different voices, right? Accents, helps us in our bank, right? So we use it when we have an internal chat GPT system for some of our products for us to use internally. When we want to look up the features of our wealth product or when we look at features of different things. But that only helps manage productivity and costs internally, right? The next thing, I guess, at the end of the day is what Tarini talked about, which is protection, which is when you know that there's all these deep fakes or technology out there, we actually need to work extra hard with technology service providers or in-house to see how can we, we got to be smarter than the scammers, right? Particularly in the EKYC side of things, we do a lot of digital lending, right? So one thing we need to really prevent on is fraud and scammers. So we need to be a step of them ahead of them when they think about, okay, so what is the potential scam opportunity over here? And so for all of these things, I think we have actually implemented quite a lot of these evolving technologies, whether some are in-house built or working with different service providers. And that to me is the crux of it. And then in the future, can we build AI agents, right? Not human agents, but AI that can effectively replicate the work that a human could do, right? But train it in a way such that it's systematic and that we can not only increase productivity, but we can retain the knowledge in-house, which is extremely key, and be able to replicate that in a larger scale, whether it's within our organization or even across border or to another organization. That is creating impact, right? Beyond hoarding it for ourselves, how can we make the whole world and the ecosystem better if we can spread that joy?
Very cool. And I think you're very correct in pointing out that everybody is calling everything AI these days, right? And if you just take a look at our editorial inbox, you'll see a whole list of AI initiatives from a variety of brands. There are a few questions coming in, but I want to not spend the whole hour talking about AI. So we'll just take one AI question and maybe one AI follow-up question from me, and then we'll move on to some of the other teams. First question, follow-up question from me, and then maybe one question from the audience. Jessica was talking about AI agents, right? And I think while the idea can be very appealing for banks because they're going to be, if well trained, it's going to be accurate, it's going to be scalable and a lot of benefits. But we're also seeing, I guess, some kind of pushback from society. We're seeing like how maybe Coca-Cola use AI in an ad, how even Disney use AI in an ad, and there's a lot of people who don't feel very good about that, and I was wondering whether or not society at large is ready to interface with AI agents. Is that something they would like, even want as a service that's offered by the banks, or do you think they ultimately would still prefer to work with a human being on the other end of the line. Anyone has any thoughts?
Yeah, Vincent, let me just clarify what I
Mm,
mean by
mm,
AI agent. And obviously, I'm
mm.
going to ask Taruni and
Sure,
Frankie to chime in here from a more
sure,
technical perspective. When I
sure.
say an AI agent, it
Mm.
doesn't mean your customer service person is an
Right,
AI robot. Okay.
got it.
It is actually, you
Mm,
think about your
mm,
process flow for a particular process. An agent is actually replicating that particular
mm,
task or action within that
mm.
process flow. So that's what I mean by an agent, not
Sure.
necessarily your customer service agent. So just for
Sure.
the audience out there. But
No
I will
worries.
call to
Yeah.
Frankie and Taruni to help
Yeah.
say that in more technical ways. But I think that is where the productivity gains
Yeah.
here. I agree with
Mm,
what Albert said, which is the
mm,
commitment that every customer request will be handled by a human. I
mm,
think that is quite important to the end
mm,
customer, right? That they
mm,
want to be talking to Albert and not
mm,
an avatar of Albert
mm.
in terms of that.
Yep. But I guess like the question is also to see whether or not society is ready for AI to
Sure.
be consumer facing as well. That's also a curiosity that I have for the panel. But I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on this. So maybe one of you can take the question if you have any strong views on this.
I think for the
Sure,
AI,
Frankie, go ahead.
really need to look into the human
Mm,
aspect.
mm,
Uh, like what the Jessica nicely, really interpret and dissect. What is the end purpose of that? Really to help us as a human, right, to have a better life, better work, right, whatever you call. So that I think ethical aspect and also the responsible aspect and transparency are key. I'm referring to how we derive that. The automation is that through a black box? We don't know what the criteria on that decision making. That is something we need to unfold. That's I refer to the transparency, and also I think the regulator are also looking into that aspects. What is the underlying model or methodology in the automation. So I think responsible transparency and most important and also ethical is the key. When we are looking into that AI space.
Okay, thanks for that, Frankie. I think let's move on to questions from the audience. Isabel is asking about the application of AI in wealth advisory. Um, do you guys see any potential use case emerging, new use cases emerging for AI in wealth advisory that you think would be interesting to talk about?
Maybe I address quickly.
Mm,
We have been discussing. The advisory role in the
mm,
wealth particular. I think will be taking a
mm,
uh, slower pace than the retail segment or the corporate segment.
mm,
Which I think what I observe is a hybrid kind of the
Yeah.
adoption
mm,
involving the human that really the face to face. The advisory, the RM, the relationship manager, together with the tools actually
mm,
to come up, say, the portfolio, what kind of investment recommending, but still the
mm.
human aspect are still a key essential item. So that's why it's a more hybrid. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that, Frankie. Let's move on to talking about branches, right? That's one of the second themes that we spoke about throughout the conversation. As you all know, the Hong Kong MA also recently had some changes, and some of the digital banks there are rethinking whether or not they want to roll out branches. And of course, that's also central, as I mentioned, to GoTime's strategy as well with the whole kiosk and phygital model. So, Albert, talk to us about what is the role of branch in banking? I didn't think we'd still be talking about this in 2025, but we still are. So, break it down for us, Albert.
Let me start off with a personal view here. Do I think
Mm,
branches will ever go away? No, I don't think
mm,
so. I think we will
mm,
get to a world where there will be a balance between digital and branches. But
mm,
what branches will do for consumers or for corporates will change over time. Now let's focus on go time and um, what we're doing here, right?
mm,
Uh, by virtue or by virtue of the license that we hold, our regulator mandates that digital banks cannot have branches. No branches for us whatsoever. We have one and only one office, and that's our main office. Again, a requirement of the central bank. But I don't think that branches are the end all and be all of customer interaction, right? And I think digital banks or digital first institutions, financial institutions, have proven that. That's why it's very important for digital banks such as ourselves to, I don't want to say mimic, but for lack of a better word, mimic that relationship that is built by a human facing another human in a branch. If financial institutions can address the same complaints, service requests, product inquiries, and so on and so forth that branches provide, but be able to do it in the comfort of my own home while I'm driving a car in a rural area, then at the end of the day, we're serving the needs of what our customers want, right? So, will branches ever be phased out? Again, I don't think so. They'll be more specialized, and I feel that when we get to the point where more specialized towards, let's say, merchants or small businesses, and I also think that it depends on the location or the country, no? So each country has its own stage of adoption and acceptance. In the Philippines, we're still challenged with being able to reach or being able to promote financial inclusivity or financial inclusion. While branches would be a good way to do that, unfortunately, they're very hard to scale.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So digital is a means for us to penetrate all of these far-flung areas. So there will be a balance between branch and digital in the near future.
I think
Vincent, if I
especially.
could,
Yes,
sorry,
go ahead,
just
Tarani.
add a point of view, because
Yeah.
a lot of our conversations on branches are with traditional banks.
Mm,
And what we're seeing is, as banks move into being banks of the future, branches are also morphing into how do I become a branch of the future. And nations banks, traditional heritage banks, have started to use that space that they have to give back to the country. So you could have a collaboration space, you could have a space where an incubation of startups could happen, you could have a space where someone who's very new to banking comes in and talks to somebody to understand financial goals and what's the best way to manage money. You could have cafes. So I think in the fullness of time we will see the purpose of a branch change. And we're also seeing certain banks recognize duty of care. That bank might be the only place where internet is available to a province or a village. So there will be other requirements that are met by branches. And I think especially in Southeast Asia, where you still have the unbanked, where you still have a divide that's digital, branches have a future.
I think that's a good point also, and duty of care as well, right? Especially in far-flung areas where they may need that kind of service. And I recall reading about a case in Australia where there are certain rural areas where it doesn't make sense financially for the bank to have an entire branch over there, and they have this model where several banks share one branch and they have the employee there, right? So that enables them to still be able to serve their customers over there who requires that kind of service. I also want to jump to Jessica and then back to Frankie, because I see Frankie has a thought. So Jessica, I think we'll jump right to you. No worries. I think it's interesting, right? Because of the Hong Kong MA's changes, and then there are banks that's looking into it. What's Relapse take on this? What do you guys think?
I think whenever we think of the word branch, we have a very set frame of mind as to what it is because of what we've been taught for many, many years. But I think what Tarumi said is very on point, which is the purpose and the nature of these physical touch points, should we say, are continuing to evolve. And so I think, well, for what GoTime are doing with the kiosks, that is a physical touch point. It, to me, is actually bringing the online virtual world into reality so that there is actually a touch point and maybe there's a human there. So I see this as being more of, is there an opportunity to combine some physical touch points or some physical elements of it? I think, unfortunately, when we use the word branch, our mind automatically jumps to some standard shape or form. But I think it's really about converging or supplementing the online digital world with some elements that may be more real, tangible in terms of that. So I don't think the form will be in the exact same form as what we, have in mind for a branch, but I think it's a combination of what Albert and Taruni said in terms of there will be some element potentially, and I do see benefits for that, particularly in for specific functions which are a little bit more complex, right? And I think it also comes down to the audience, right? What is the audience preferences? At the end of the day, even for what you said for wealth, I don't think there's anything wrong with the digital wealth offerings right now. In fact, I think they are fantastic, but it's not about the product. It comes down to the human acceptance of a lot of these things. And so it does take time. Now, whether this is a 5-year thing or a 10-year thing, I don't have a crystal ball, but we are moving towards that direction. But I agree with Albert, branches won't go away, but it's about how do they evolve into a slightly different shape or form in the future.
So what is WeLab doing in this area? Are you guys planning to roll out some shape of or form of branches in the near future, or are you keeping your cards close to your heart at the moment? What's your views on that, Jessica?
I think I think everything is based on whether there is a need and value to do so. I think when we're ready to talk about it, we'll talk about it. I think in different parts of the world, as Taruni said, there are different reasons and rationale for that.
We'll be following up on that very quick, very soon. Moving on to Frankie. Frankie, you seem to have a lot of thoughts and views on this. I'm excited to hear what you have to think about this.
It's inspiring. I mean, hearing, I mean, all the thoughts. And one word come to my mind is only is a purpose. I mean, again, I mean the branch, no matter, I mean, how it evolves, the specific, I mean, form, whatever. What is the purpose? Purpose is really serving the customer, right? No matter it's digital or physical, you call it branch and take it personal. I still want to visit the branch for some purpose. And technology really support both. I mean, at the end of the day, technology is enabling some business purpose. So I think that's the key thing, take away from me.
Yeah. I like what both of you said, right? Then it's very purpose driven and like Jessica also said, we need to rethink about how we feel about branches, because I think a lot of our experience is so embedded in us when we were younger. We go with the parents to pay some bills and complain and yell at people, and that's a whole different thing, right? I think we could look at it as more of an experience center, rethink about how we want to approach branches. I think with that, let's move on. Let's switch gear and maybe move on and talk a little bit about open banking a little bit. I think there's some developments in the Philippines, right, Albert? How is open banking doing in the Philippines?
Yeah, I have to admit, Vincent, I'm not very how do you say this? Very in depth into open banking, but what I do know at the skin of it, if you allow me, that is that there is really a move to expand it, right? There is really a move to expand it, and I think this is where I al- I refer to my original statement when we were earlier on before the webinar, was about playing nice. for open banking to work, um, uh, all institutions have to be ready to cooperate and share, right? I think that's the basic of it all, because at the center of open banking is really the customer or the consumer is saying, hey, I consent, I allow you to share my information and use it. Don't be selfish, it's mine. So I think that's where we're getting there. We're getting to the grips of that, and very important um, is regulation. Being able to for the regulators to see this and say, yes, it's good for the consumer, but uh, there's also a lot of opportunities for this to be abused, right? So, is it going as fast as I want in the Philippines? The adoption of open banking, my personal opinion, no. I'd like it to go a little bit faster, but I think there is wisdom to what the regulators are doing, and I trust that there is something that they see that we at the operating level can't.
I think as a consumer, I just can't wait to be able to consolidate all my accounts into a single view. That's like the
You
one
said it.
basic thing. Yeah.
I
Does anyone
share
else?
your view.
Yeah, I'm sure everybody feels the same way. Does anyone else have anything to add about what they feel about open banking and what we can expect from open banking this year? Charuni, you want to go?
Vincent,
Mm,
I think we're going to see tailwinds coming.
mm,
So, of course, I'm an optimist. I see huge benefits in open banking, helping credit score, bringing in
mm,
alternate data so that as an ASEAN bloc, this problem of the unbanked can actually be solved.
mm,
But I think what's also kind of going to really help move this forward is what we're seeing in the payment space. Uh, as we speak, regulators are talking about Project Nexus coming in. We will
mm,
see micro SMEs being able to operate at a regional level. ISO 222, which I know Frankie is a
mm,
big fan of, will allow us to know exactly what each payment is being made for. If all of that data comes together with open banking and banks, finally shake hands and say, yes, we will share, the benefit to the end customer, the benefit to that entrepreneur who's a woman who has no access to finance is so large.
mm,
um, I am really hopeful that this year will be the year where, like an electronic record for your medical purposes comes
mm.
and has everything of what you've done, we will see something similar even in the financial services space.
Fingers crossed. That's what I'm also looking forward to as well. Does anyone else have anything else to add about open banking? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next subject. Yes, Jessica,
I
go
think the
ahead.
only thing I would say on open banking is
Mm,
the concept of it needs all the participants
mm,
to feel that they need to be part of this, right? They can't be
mm,
forced to be part of this. I think
mm,
historically you'll see this for a number of reasons. One is security, because I think everyone is always concerned about data security, etc. And I think that is very valid, whether it's from the consumer side or whether it's from
mm,
the organization, right? So I think that's the first thing. I can keep it safe, but how do I know that Temenos is going to keep it
mm.
safe when I give it to them, right? For example. Right? So I'm picking on Frankie because I know he doesn't take my data. So, so I think that's one thing. I think the second thing has also been data is currency. So why do
Mm,
people want to share their currency with others, right? If I
mm,
am, the leading player in the world, why do I want to lose some of
mm,
my competitive edge? And I think that is one thing that I really admire
mm,
someone who is like an open AI, a Sam Altman, to say that, look, we're doing this so that
mm,
if we work collaboratively, we can all develop something that's more powerful for the benefit of the wider audience, right? To Taroni's point, which is the purpose and the benefit that we can get from that is much larger. But it does take the leaders or the scalable participants to be able to create that movement towards that. And I really hope, and this is what we're
mm,
doing in being a digital player in the world of fintech, right? This is what we want
mm,
to inspire others to see the benefit.
mm,
Progressing, I think, at a pace that is comfortable for regulators, for large institutions.
mm,
but it will have to run its course, and it's very understandable.
Mm,
Hope that it will run there faster, but there are paths and processes that we need to go towards. But I encourage everyone to
mm,
think about the greater good, right? To be interoperable platforms, to not have systems
mm,
that are exclusive to yourself, to be, as I said, interoperable, to be open in terms of sharing, because that way it becomes a lot more compatible and we can move so much faster as a society.
mm. Gosh, without realizing it, it's almost been an hour already, and we're almost towards the end of the session. But I think, Frankie, you again have some
Yeah,
interesting thoughts, I'm sure. Go ahead. I'd like to hear more from
quick
you.
one. Quick one. Again, I mean, the collaboration and consent
Mm,
is key in driving the adoption on this open banking. And again, technology is ready for that, right? I mean, we are talking about the API. Come on, I mean,
mm,
API 10 years back, 15 years back already exists. It's just a
mm.
communication protocol that we can interface data between systems, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
technology is there, and really the collaboration and consent, and also one forces is the regulator. I mean, learning
Mm,
from Europe, right? They have the PSD2 GDPR driven much faster than those. I mean, the market driven location, like I mean, most parts in the Asia. So
mm.
we may, I mean, consider about this driving force to get it accelerated. Yeah.
For sure. I, for one, can't wait to see it accelerated as well. Well, before we move on to some closing thoughts, I selfishly have one more question for Albert. I think one of the big stories that's coming out of the Philippines is that on the 1st of Jan, the Bangko Sentral ng Filipinas announced the official lifting of the digital banking license moratorium, right? What's your views? What's your thoughts? What do you think that will do to Philippines' banking space?
Let me be candid here,
Yeah.
Vincent. At the onset, we thought that this would uh, this is just additional competition, right?
Mm,
We're not ready. But after going through it as an industry and dissecting, we actually welcome this. This will be good for the Philippines. We're one with the BSP there. The choice will help enable awareness for one. It will also expedite the BSP's advocacy of financial inclusion. Right.
mm.
This is where I guess an opportunity for existing digital banks and incoming digital banks to show what we're made of,
Mm,
to showcase products and features that would, at the end of the day, help the Filipino people. Um, so the view here really is it can only do good. It can increase awareness. It can expedite inclusion. It's also a means by which traditional banks, whether they're universal,
mm.
commercial, thrift banks, can probably learn a lesson or two, and tweak their services. Right.
So, just a cheeky question before we move on. Do you think there's enough demand for 10 digital banks? And do you think ultimately, maybe 5, 10 years down the road, all these 10 players will still be around?
Oh, cheeky is right. um, I remember someone asking me that question, or something similar to that question, uh, maybe 2 years back when
uh,
an an e-money player was starting up in the Philippines, right? And look at where they are now. So yes, I believe there is room. Will 10 be the magic number? I'll be equally cheeky and say um, maybe one or two will stay or consolidate. I don't know.
we will see. We will see in the years to
your
come.
guess
Who
your
knows?
guess is as good as mine, Vincent.
I suppose. I suppose. Thank you for that, Albert. Now let's move on to closing thoughts, and then we'll start with Jessica, Taruni, and then we'll wrap it up with Frankie. Jessica, any closing thoughts for us? Any core ideas, core points that you think we might have missed that you want to share with our audience before we go?
Yeah, I think this is actually a really interesting trend, and we've talked about a lot of different markets here,
Mm,
and I think this is a prevalent trend that you will see moving across, particularly the different ASEAN markets in the coming months and years, right? I mean, we all tend to work side by side, right?
mm,
Directionally. I don't think any of the, I mean, we're all, partners, friends, and, around the region. And actually, it makes a lot of sense because a lot of the issues or problems we're facing are actually quite similar, right? When we think about financial inclusion, when we think about the underserved. So actually what we should do is actually really
mm,
work together to learn from each other. So
mm,
when we see the trends happening, digital banks, Hong Kong, Singapore, and then, Malaysia with formal regimes, Indonesia didn't have one, Philippines was
mm,
kind of didn't have one, now they have one, so across the markets we all learn from each other. And then Thailand
mm.
now on the verge of issuing licenses later this year.
Yeah.
I think this is a real benefit to be able to learn from one of your neighboring partners.
Mm,
We always joke about this and saying, not only are you getting the best practices, you're also learning about what are the things not to do. No one ever tells you about the mistakes. Everyone tells you about the best practices. No one tells you, do not ever do that because for whatever reason, this went wrong, 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 right?
yeah.
We've worked with AWS in Hong Kong. We've worked with Temenos
Mm,
as well. So they know a lot of our secrets too, right? In terms of, what didn't go right, and vice versa. So I think
mm,
that is actually something that, collaboration at the end of the day is something that's extremely key. Regulators talk to each other. We as
mm,
industry participants talk to each other. And I think it's extremely important to continue that dialogue and this open mindedness so that we can all, learn from each other, and not make the
mm,
same mistakes. As Albert said, we need to play nice, right? And I think that's exactly the objective. Um, Having said that,
mm.
whilst we're playing nice, I think at the end of the day, we always need to listen to the consumer,
Of
right?
course.
And read the room. What do they want? What is it
Mm,
out there? We can't be pushing our own agenda if we're
mm,
not listening to the voice of what the customer needs. And so I think this is always forever going to be an iterative
mm,
process. You need to be humbled every now and then, but you also need to be forward looking and aggressive. So this is how we keep each other in balance. And I hope, the next time I see all of you again, we will continue this iterative discussion and continue to grow and build something beautiful going forward.
Thanks, Jessica. A lot of lovely points brought up over there. Moving on to Teroni, your closing thoughts for us. You are muted.
We've spoken
There
a
we
lot
go.
about what's going to happen on the technology side, what's going to happen with the way banks are running and operating. I think there's also another very important pillar that keeps this, that will lead to whether you succeed, and that is the workforce of tomorrow. As we see so much change coming in through technology, we're also hearing customers spend a lot more time on how do I make personnel in the bank also ready to adopt the technology that's coming out. I would put FY25 also about the year of
Mm,
learning, about of changing the skills that you have and being ready to really make full use of anything new that's coming our way.
mm. Thanks for that, Teroni. Lovely message to end on. Frankie, what are your final thoughts to help us wrap up this session?
I think really the mindset is important.
Mm,
Mindset in the aspect how open we see all this. I mean, the emerging trends, technologies, and to couple with that is the collaboration among this bigger ecosystem. I mean, I can't agree anymore
mm,
with what Jessica mentioned about this ASEAN and even a broader global collaboration is key to learn
mm,
and really to improve. And um, and agility really important,
mm.
and resilience. I mean, this is on a personal aspect and also working aspects. I mean, because of the rate acceleration of all these kind of
Yeah.
transformation. I mean, something down
Mm,
or whatever. I mean, how quickly we can up again as a
mm,
human as well. I mean, there are good time, bad time. How
mm,
can then? I mean, the after we drop.
mm.
So I think it's key, really.
Thanks, Frankie. And my key takeaway from talking to all of you today is that there's a lot of things going on. There's always going to be some fancy, shiny new thing that's coming up. But at the core of it is uh, not to push our own agenda, but also just to focus on what the consumer actually wants, right? Because it's like it might be the coolest AI, but if the use case is not suitable, then what really is the point for the consumer, anyways? And I guess another key thing that we will be at least keeping out an eye on in FinTech News Network is the conversation around profitability for digital banks, right? Because a lot of them are starting to hit their 4 or 5 year operation cycle, and that's where typically the profitability will kick in, and that's something that we'll be keeping a very close eye on. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we really thank all of you for taking the time to share all your valuable thoughts with us, and of course the audience for spending the hour with us to learn from our fellow panelists. And we're sorry we can't take all the questions. There's just so much to talk about, but we hope that you guys learn as much as I did. And with that, I thank you all, and I wish you all a great day ahead. Take care and bye bye.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Thank you.